Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome back to the Bruderhof's YouTube channel, where we are taking up the book Called to Community once again after a little break.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting with a pretty heavy-hitting chapter here, chapter 9. It's entitled Counterculture. And it's from an excerpt. Is it from the Wineskins book?
No, I think it's from Liberating the Church by Howard Snyder.
And in summary, how can I summarize this? So Dr. Snyder talks about how it would have been easy for Jesus to leave us a book of instructions, if you will, or how to set up and organize church. But that's not what he did. He really lived with the apostles and showed by example, and then also through parables and stories. So it's really up to the believers then to parse out the model for living his teachings after he left especially. So he talks about how the first disciples did that and how they would go and their messages and writings kind of dictated how the church operated.
They kind of figured it out on the go,
Yeah.
but it was based in the past. It was based in modes of living that they were familiar with. But with this new revelation through the Holy Spirit of fellowship and common life. So like the first unit where the church took shape primarily was in homes, right? In the homes of the believers.
And in family settings.
And in family settings. And that's how the faith was passed on, primarily with parents to children.
And then gradually it started to become more intentional, and the church kind of, as Snyder puts it, developed a consciousness as a new people. So I thought that...
New people distinct from the world around them.
Yes.
And that's the title of the chapter is counterculture, and how as Christians we are meant to live counterculturally. Now, when I think of counterculture, what comes to your mind? Because to my mind, I think of you think of the 60s, like the hippie movement, people who like really tried to step outside of the norms. Or for our communities, like when our community started in Germany in 1920, there was what was called the Jugendbewegung, the youth movement, where young people rejected their parents' mores and social stratification, and really just wanted... So that's one way of thinking about countercultural. The problem with thinking about countercultural that way is it just becomes like another brand. Yeah. That you take for yourself. And is that really what Jesus calls us to? Are we supposed to be, is this like a lifestyle choice that we make?
Yeah, when I think of counterculture, it is kind of an inspiring and exciting word, but I think it's a concept or idea that you could easily start to worship or to pay more attention to than actually like humbly living out your faith.
Yeah.
And working with others and...
Well, yeah, discipleship as a matter of obedience primarily, which takes work. Yeah, I think, so then Snyder talks about in what sense the church should be countercultural or should be a contrast community. And he takes various passages, 1 John 15, 18 through 19, that we are to be in the world, but not of it. This is something I heard, growing up in the Bruderhof a lot. This is our task, is to be in the world, but not of it. And what does that mean? It means that we are not supposed to retreat from the world or seek our own salvation separate from the world, but we should not conform to the practices of the world.
Yeah, and I resonated what Snyder said here. He said, Jesus plants us in a place of tension. We are to maintain that tension against a strong pull to a more comfortable position, either out of the world or totally of the world. And I definitely feel that. I think as a church we struggle with or feel that tension.
We're in that
for
tension,
sure.
yeah.
As the world progresses and technology and the culture and there is that constant battle.
Well, sometimes you think the easy thing would be to like, let's cut the cord and let's, just get away from all this stuff, which is obviously not good for us.
And just retreat.
Retreat. Or on the other hand, just wholesale give in and say, well, this is the way, and let things that are more and more normal in society start to seem normal to us. If you think of like sort of the deviant or what shall I say, things that 10 years ago were not acceptable are now the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And you can let that harden your conscience.
Right, and I think both those attitudes are kind of defeatist attitudes. So that tension is a good thing, and it's not something to shy away from.
Well, it is what it is. I mean, that's I mean, be in the world but not of it.
Yes.
Anyway, I was thinking about this question of obedience as opposed to like counterculture. I was reading at the beginning of this year from the Didache, again, the early Christian teaching. I think it was a baptismal teaching. The teachings of the other title is the teachings of the 12 apostles, and I kind of just love the way it opens. There are two ways: the way of life and the way of death, and choose life. And what other ways of death? It talks of all the things that are of the world that we should not conform to. But then there's and Snyder talks about this too, the positive. There's a positive and a negative to being countercultural. So then the negative aspect would be, fleeing from immorality or what other things? Resistance.
The Benedict option.
Yeah. We won't go there. But the positive things are also in a way like we should not forget those things, and those should actually be, how do we as Christians contribute to human flourishing around us? I mean, that's evangelization. That's spreading the gospel. It's what positive effect.
Like John 17:18. Go ye into the world, or being sent into the world to preach the gospel of peace.
So we're not there like finger wagging at everyone else.
That would be tiring.
That would be tiresome. But we do hold to, standards, gospel standards. But then, and I love this part, he references Revelation 23 through 27, which talks about the people of God and how they will be the glory of the nations. This suggests a positive evaluation of cultural diversity and of human cultural works. All that is good in human works, whatever is pure, lovely, true, honorable, and harmonious, will be brought into the city of God. This means Christians themselves have a positive contribution to make to culture. That's a really exciting thing. We don't just sit on the side and say, what a wicked world, and read our Bibles. There are things beyond the religious. There are things beyond what you might generally just associate with church that is also kingdom work.
Yeah, and I love that the church can legitimately engage in the culture where it adds beauty and harmony, like Snyder puts it here, and also just good to the world. So that's exciting.
Yeah. At the end, he speaks of the danger of the countercultural model, which we also spoke about. The danger of the countercultural model is that it may lead inward, away from worldly engagement. So again, to this tension that we have to live in.
And maybe to add to that, it just occurs to me that like the tension is going to be there and we must accept it, but that doesn't mean like there has to be a fear with that. Like if you reject fear, then you can handle that tension and grapple with it. But fear is kind of what turns us inward and not willing to engage with the world. Yeah.
Well, great chapter. Give it a read. Drop some comments below. In what ways do you think the church needs to be more, do we as Christians need to be more countercultural? In what ways are we missing that? And just interested in any of your thoughts on this chapter. And we look forward to next week. We'll continue chapter 10, The Way, Alden Bass. Thanks for watching.